All right, hey everybody. I got my sister that's here. We're going to be going through some of her background a little bit, just talking about. We're rounding out a whole conversation just about your health journey, my health journey, and what questions to ask, what things to get through, how you should view it. And I wanted to give you kind of a different perspective. And I kind of come from a background. I've done, everything from keto to paleo, tried different things, just seeing what my body really does. And there's a few things that I've come to a conclusion on to make sure that you know your body the best, and being able to actually start reading your body better and better and better is going to make you a more healthy person in general. Wanted to bring my sister on to give you a little bit different perspective. I'm basically kind of a carnivore at this point. So I wanted to bring on my sister who is a vegan and kind of get into her journey and kind of where our stories align, but also kind of where they differ in a lot of the areas, and just kind of get into that. So Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, bro. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just go ahead and jump into this. What's your background, and specifically kind of what's your military affiliation? Because I feel like some people, even maybe a younger audience, can kind of identify potentially with this as well. So what's your background overall, and what's your military affiliation kind of growing up?
Sure. Well, I was a dependent. Our dad was in the Air Force until I was in the 9th grade. And then he went into a contracting position, so still worked at a military base. And then my brother and sister-in-law being in the military, so I've had to chase them and their kids all over the country. But I think we had a different experience somewhat, just not having to move around a lot, but having a lot of friends kind of come in and out of our lives. I grew up from kindergarten to the end of my 8th grade year in one town at Dias Air Force Base.
Yep.
So quite a different experience, I know, than a lot of military families. And then we moved to Mississippi, to my mom's hometown, after my dad retired. I think we went to school with a lot of kids that were military dependents, so those were most of our friends. Seeing them kind of come.
Yeah, no, and one of the things that it's been interesting for me to kind of still stay being in the military through my short career, and then even being out and just kind of following around. Like, we have a neighbor, not basically kind of catty corner to where we are right now. And his dad was actually a navigator for B-1s at Dias Air Force Base at the exact same time that we were there. He's a few years behind dad, but he, dad by that point was really kind of into these safety roles and ended up being kind of chief of safety for a lot of stuff. So he's outside of the squadrons, and the guy was quite a few years behind. I mean, I think, dad went through pilot training and graduated 75, and I think his dad graduated probably like 79 or 80. So not, and then they got stationed in different places, but it's just kind of funny. One of the, being a small world, being a small military, you end up sometimes moving very close to people that you used to know. It's, I had a guest on my podcast, Brandon Groney, and just talked about, his health journey, and just kind of how a lot of times it does feel that, especially while you're in, that it does feel kind of like the Air Force family, that there's always these connections that you can make with people that are there, and you always will typically kind of see them again, or have a friend of a friend. It's kind of one of those funny questions you always ask, like, oh, well, do you know this person? It's kind of always one of the running jokes is when you meet somebody new, it's like, oh, do you know these people? Just trying to find the right connections, your 7 degrees of bacon or whatever it might be.
Right. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I went to a continuing education for my career as an occupational therapist with just a new group of friends. So I went to school in Mississippi, but it was some friends here in South Carolina. They all went to school in Charleston. And so there's a military base in Charleston. Yep. And so the girl that we stayed with, her husband went through pilot training with dad.
Yeah.
And he knew dad and remembered his dead on Elvis impersonation.
So it's what we get for having a quirky dad, I guess.
I know. I wouldn't
Well,
have it any other way.
yeah. And there's, it's funny too, because Dad's even had people who, he had the son of one of his buddies that he used to fly with that ended up being the co-pilot, um, or maybe the nav. I can't quite remember, but he was one of the 4 in the Fairchild B-52 crash. McGeehan was his name. And then I know you guys went to school with McGeehan, the son. And so Dad actually got an opportunity to teach the son when he came through pilot training. And so that's kind of one of those full circle things for Dad.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember that. Huh.
Yeah. So
Very
just
small
really,
world.
yeah, really, really small world. So that's kind of your affiliation with the military. And so I always kind of want to connect that back, but I want to get into kind of the topic that I've been, discussing with my audience and with other guests here as well. And that's just, the health journey that people have. And I wanted to say what in general kind of got you started on your health journey. What got you thinking about, hey, this is actually really important for my lifestyle in general? Like, where did that genesis, come from, and where did that take you?
Sure. Well, I did start out more as vegetarian and kind of accidentally fell into the vegan world. And just a side note, I guess, kind of the plant-based diet is different than that vegan lifestyle. And, whether, you ascribe to one, label or the other, that's up to you. But personally, I consider myself vegan. I think just when I got out of the college dorm life and having to start cooking for myself, thinking about, shopping, not being in the cafeteria anymore, being a real adultier adult, just starting to think about what was a healthy choice for me and just thinking about where my food came from beyond the grocery store. But I mean, of course, my struggles really were even at the grocery store, just trying to start that process of, adulthood, and kind of started out with, ground turkey instead of ground beef was, my thought of what was healthy. But started kind of as vegetarian, thinking, you know what, I wouldn't look this animal in the eye and take its life for me to eat. I'm not going to ask somebody else to do that. So my journey didn't start from a nutrition standpoint necessarily. I guess in some ways it did, because I was trying to make generally more nutritious choices for myself. I'm not eating chicken nuggets and meatloaf out of the cafeteria anymore. Trying to eat more vegetables, and just, I guess that part of the journey was being kind of stepping into the adulthood world. But I kind of struggled with weight all my life. I remember having concerns about that even in 3rd grade. And so my first glimpse into veganism, I didn't really know the difference between veganism, vegetarianism. What did that really mean? I bought a book called Skinny Bitch. Yep. Kind of just another circle of dieting at that point. And I didn't realize it was a vegan lifestyle book. So that kind of gave me a glimpse into that world. And right at the same time, just had someone, I think it was from PETA on my college campus, handing out brochures. And it had a picture of a pig on the front of it and a picture of a dog. And it was saying, if you knew my name, you wouldn't eat me. And I thought about that, of course, if you know an animal that has a personality, just like our dogs do, why would you choose to eat that animal instead of being its friend? So it was very much, I guess, not necessarily a nutritional journey, but
sure.
And then, so I jumped right in. I went and got all of the substitutes and just started kind of vegan, like Lunchables for a while. And it didn't go very well. I had some health issues that were possibly maybe unrelated, but you know how, if you eat something and then you get sick, you're not going to eat that anymore.
Yeah.
So I'll always kind of have some questions about kind of some soy issues, and maybe I had some thyroid issues going on, so maybe some hormonal issues. So I will always kind of question if those things went hand in hand. Went back vegetarian for a while, and then surprisingly got back on the vegan train when I made friends with some people who were eating a paleo diet. When I started CrossFit, I just started thinking about that, quote, clean eating. I wanted to eat vegan and wanted to do a better job of it, wanted to do it in a better way. And so I started eating more vegetables and more whole foods, less and less processed foods. And that was a much more positive experience for me. And just, combining that with CrossFit, it's been a very good thing, a very positive thing, health-wise, and that, kind of weight loss issue that I was having as well.
Yeah, that's been one of the things, just seeing your progress and stuff over the years, that I think it was one of the biggest changes for you. And I don't do CrossFit anymore, and it's not that I am negative on the idea, and I totally understand where people's criticisms of CrossFit come from, for sure. But there is something to be said about being around that team atmosphere and about being around other people who
it means so much. Sure.
It means a lot. You're coming back to the accountability again and again and again. And I think there is something to really be said about a program like that works for people that are especially used to being on teams and thrive working with other people. And I certainly had that, experience, and I've had other experiences where I've had, a personal trainer. I don't like working out by myself. It's like one of the last things that I want to do. I'd rather be working out with somebody and kind of competing in that regard. That's all I've ever done. And I certainly can.
Oh yeah, true.
In watching that, what I want to go back to is like when you transitioned from, college lifestyle. And I would say I had a very similar kind of experience. I ended up buying like a set of, $2,000 pots and pans to have like the best fresh stuff. And I started buying everything organic. And of course I ran track in college. So I was a little bit more keen to what I should be putting in my body, because our track coach was an Olympic coach as well. And so he was very much into that. So we always did presentations for that. And he gave, stay away from partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, stay away from high fructose corn syrup, stay away from a lot of the what I call kind of Frankenfood type of stuff. And this is where I think I also agree with a lot of vegans for a lot of the processing of the food. And I don't necessarily like a lot of the meats and stuff, even though I am more of a carnivore. That's where I also got really into hunting when I was out in Montana as well, where I felt a lot more, I will say, while I am a Christian, I will say even being out in the woods and being out in the mountains and hunting and thanking an animal for what it provides, even though in taking its life, it's sustaining life. It's for lack of a better word, it's part of the circle. And that's certainly kind of where I come from. And I certainly respect, other points of view on that as well. But for me, that was much more of a natural thing, and being able to go to ranches and farmers who took much better care and were open to being able to bring people on their farms and not just having, mass, meat go take to places where the last thing that they know is, all they know is the smell of blood and fear the whole time that they're going through that. So I certainly can understand from a factory farming standpoint that I think understanding where your food comes from, and if you're not, and I personally, if you're not willing, just like you said, if you're not willing to take the life of an animal for yourself, why would you ask someone else to do that? And I certainly sympathize with that, even though I might come down on a separate, side of that as well. So I certainly do that. But getting back to like your first, when you really kind of came out of college, did you feel better when you went through the transition? Were you like, wow, this actually has changed how I feel about myself. It's been better. Did you see that the food actually kind of changed your overall understanding of life? Did you feel better? That those kinds of questions that come along with it.
It's changing into kind of the
Did you
vegan
feel,
lifestyle.
let me just get out of my own head. Did you feel better when you transitioned from one style of eating to another style of eating?
I did, because well, it was right at that same time where I started CrossFit, when I got into it truly, and thinking about food. I mean, from my own headspace to my body, um, I was eating to fuel my body for this,
Right.
hobby, this new hobby I found. And I will say, just CrossFit was my window into the fitness world. Whatever, anybody else's experience is, I mean, whatever motivates you, that is beautiful and wonderful. That's just my personal experience. That's kind of
Right.
my, my family, my new kind of home away from home. But,
Sure.
I've made a lot of friends moving away and being away from kind of my hometown. And, so that's, another reason why that's so motivating and means a lot to me. But, it was a big change for me. So absolutely, I felt much different, much better, from a mental and physical standpoint. And I never would have pushed myself or really noticed. And I think the combination of that sort of intensity of workout with the food kind of makes me watch my body, listen to my body more. I think I was having issues with dairy, I mean, probably more than anything all along, and never recognized or realized that. Um, gut issues, and even my skin issues as well. My skin has cleared up. Migraines. I used to have migraines. My mom would tell me from when I was 2 years old. I would stand on my head and rub my head on the edge of the couch, and I couldn't even tell. I couldn't tell her in words, but I would just be crying. And she's like, "What is wrong? What is wrong with her?" And I was having migraines, and I hardly have migraines anymore.
Yeah.
So I mean, there have been a lot of big differences,
Yeah.
but I think those things do go hand in hand.
Yeah, I personally think there's a lot to be said about, and one of the things that changed my mind, and I don't remember where I heard it exactly, but someone goes, as much as people are against drugs, the one thing you need to fundamentally understand about your life and your food is a drug. Food
Oh, absolutely.
specifically changes how your body interacts with itself, how your body adapts, how it regulates, all that stuff, and so
It's
every
chemicals.
it is. It's funny to me. Like, I think, especially when Jackie and I got together, one of the first things, and this is, I dated a few other girls and stuff too, and had started having a conversation. And there's this multi-year kind of understanding that came along with it, very similar to you. I started thinking about what I was buying. I started doing more research. I started looking into, alternative stuff. I started questioning a lot of what the FDA or what the USDA, the food pyramid, I started questioning a lot of that stuff, and just looking into, where they even get their idea for this in the first place. And you go, oh, that happened to be funded by a certain, type of company that's out there. And it's like, well,
Right.
that seems a bit ridiculous that a government institution that's supposed to be on your side telling you what's healthy. And it turns out a lot of that stuff is the exact opposite advice, or at least has a huge caveat to it. So that
Mm-hmm.
seems mind-boggling to me, that, oh yeah, well, that's what we're going to do. Instead, we'll do margarine, which is a few molecules away from plastic, instead of actually having real butter, or any other really good oil that's out there for you, that were options at the time. But because we decided not to push it and mainstream it in the consumer society that we have, of course, that's what we get, is all of the middle aisles and supermarkets basically being made of all the franken foods that you could possibly think
Right.
of. And so, and one of the things I told Jackie when we first got together was like, you need to get off of birth control. Um, Anything that's going to go into your body over time, even though it might make you feel normal in the short term, the more that you're putting something in your body that your thyroid or whatever else is trying to regulate your body, it's going to have long-term effects. Just because I started doing the research on it and seeing a lot of other men and women and everything else going through a lot of similar circumstances. And that's one of the things that, I mean, it changed her world around. And we started getting really into just, okay, what are we putting in our body? Let's eat whole foods. What would it be like if we did, a Whole30 challenge? Let's do it for 60 days. Let's eat raw food. Let's just do slightly cooked vegetables instead, And so we started doing that stuff. And I felt amazing. I felt way better. Body composition changed for me, where I was able to actually put on weight that I hadn't been able to put on in over 10 years.
Yeah.
Maybe even more than that. I mean, I gained 10 pounds during a 60-day eating challenge, doing CrossFit 3 days a week. And because that's where apparently my body was supposed to be. And
your body changed a lot. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say the one thing that, we've gone back and forth and different things, and I've done different items of research. And being a marketing guy, I try to understand and dig into what's marketing and what's not, what's hype versus what's actual data and science. Even though the science might not be the best, what can you really get out of it? And so I did the carnivore diet when we moved here, and this might be a shock to you, but I went up to 195 pounds when I think the average weight I've really been most of my life has been about 160. So I gained about 30 pounds from the time that we got pregnant with our third baby, Eliana. And I gained, I think at the time I might've been 170, and I gained probably 25 pounds from that before we moved here. And as soon as we moved here, I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to go straight into carnivore. And I basically I don't do it as much as I did now. But when we got here, especially, I was doing mainly steak and burgers and stuff. And in a matter of just a few months, I went from 195 all the way down to 175, 170. So basically lost all that weight. And I was like, I feel fantastic. Like even with the Whole30 diet that I did, I've never felt the way that I feel now. I didn't even go through like the keto flu. I didn't go through any of those symptoms. My energy levels were up. I was like ready to go. I wasn't even having to drink coffee. I mean, it was crazy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What is that like?
And so there's just things there. But again, I acknowledge while that it certainly helped me, and it's the best I've felt, like, you still have to acknowledge like what deficits might it bring.
Sure.
Yeah, there's deficits that.
I mean, is that something that you would ever consider doing long term? I mean, I don't know much about it, but it just on the surface even seems like it's not sustainable.
And one of the things is, and this is where, I'm going to do a longer stint on this because there is a lot of research. A woman named Nora Gedgadaus is a big proponent of it. And while she certainly has a financial incentive to push her books and other stuff, I mean, it's based on her research and everything else that's out there. And I look to that stuff, and again, you take it as a grain of salt. But I certainly want to dig into a lot more of where that comes from and why you might not need other things. And, it flies way in the face of where you're coming from. And so but I want to be able to have these conversations and these discussions that are out there, because there's certain things that you can't get from other sources that you can get from your meat sources, red meat specifically, that you can't get really anywhere else, at least in that much of a nutrient dense package that you're going to be able to get overall. I think it's a little bit folly. And this is where, the paleontologists might, at least from where certain diets get their knowledge from when it comes to paleontology, is there's certain things we may or may not know about where our ancestors specifically got their food from. And I think in my criticism, I guess, of veganism is, we were hunter-gatherers. And while we ate, a lot of vegetables diet, we also specifically went out and hunted for meat.
Right.
And I think that is something that's there, but we're also omnivores that can adapt better than any other species that's out there for what we eat. And I think that's a great thing. I think that's fantastic, because it shows a level of optimization that a one size fits all diet doesn't apply, which is also with my guest I had, Brandon Groney. is part of ID Life, and they have supplements. And, there's a question of whether you even need supplements to begin with anyway, if you're eating correctly. But then again,
Right.
what is eating correctly? Where can you get your food? There's places you can't even get healthy food, so you might need to supplement. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are out there. And I get it's unregulated, which again, I'm a fan of, but that's neither here nor there. And but what do people really need? And what can people experiment with? What can people start to really get to know and understand their body with? And that's what the whole idea of this health conversation and people's health journey is encouraging people to start helping them find the right place to start to getting to understand their body to a degree that they can make the best decisions about what they're putting in their body themselves, no matter where they go, and that they have the freedom to experiment. And one of the best things that his company does at ID Life is they do a blood test. And I'm a big fan of actually going in and doing blood tests for what your diet is, because not just like, you and I are Caucasian, we come from mainly an English background. There is a little bit of Native American and mixed with some other things from the South that are there. But for the majority, that's basically where we come from. My wife, she's, I think, Irish, basically almost half Irish and half German. Just those differences alone have different impacts for where we are at today biologically. And I think getting into the nitty gritty of what your DNA says about where you're at currently matters just as much as being able to experiment as well.
Were you able to, I'm really interested in that too. I agree with that kind of, being your own guinea pig and just figuring out what's right for you and how you feel your best. But did you do any of the blood testing when you did the carnivore diet?
I've done 2 tests, and there was a couple different, because sometimes they're looking for specific things that are in there. So I wanted to know what my testosterone level was. I also personally think that men these days don't have nearly the amount of testosterone, which is detrimental. It's also the reason why I don't think any man should ever touch soy with the phytoestrogens that are in it, because from all the evidence I've seen, our bodies can't tell the difference between naturally produced estrogen and phytoestrogen that's out there. And so when it goes into our body, it can have massively negative effects, especially if you're giving soy formula or whatever to babies in the most critical points of their life. That amount of estrogen in people's bodies can have, especially men's bodies, can have very devastating effects long-term. That being said, I was looking at just overall testosterone, but then I did one that was more specific to food items in general. And I did find that everyone talks about, oh, well, you should, you look at Pinterest, or you look at any of these other things, you should take garlic for a cleanse, and you should do, you should have almond milk, best way to go. Don't do peanuts, they're legumes, the whole paleo thing. And I come to find out, I'm really sensitive, almost borderline allergic to almonds and to garlic. So I bring those two things up to go, yeah, these are supposed to be super healthy, superfoods, and yet I'm allergic to them. And it could be that it's a DNA problem, but it also could be that maybe I've been doing nothing but drinking these things for the last 3 years, thinking that they're super healthy for me, and I haven't been diversifying enough. Maybe I haven't.
Well, yeah, I kind of wonder, I guess in a similar way, I've done Whole30 a few times from a vegan standpoint, to the degree that I could, to try to learn more about my sensitivities. And now I kind of wonder, am I more sensitive to things because I avoided them, or is that a true sensitivity? And jumping back on that soy, and since you've, shared personal things about Jackie, I was going to say, when I got really sick, when I first just jumped on that vegan bandwagon from the vegetarian experience and just went with all the kind of faux meats and faux cheese and things like that, I found an issue. It was a pharmacy error in my birth control. I got the wrong kind, and I don't know how long that had been going on, but around that same time. And I had not my thyroid, I guess my parathyroid hormones were way off. It made me really sick. Had 3 different doctor appointments in a span of 5 days, from the emergency room to, they tested me for all kinds of things before they finally figured out it was a thyroid issue. They tested me for strep. They tested me for flu. They tested me for mono. They tested me for bronchitis. It was a bizarre experience, but that was finally the issue, and had to go to a specialist. Now, he did say, I asked him about my diet, and he did say it was more likely related to the birth control hormones.
Yeah, and that's what we discovered with Jackie too, and I think that's why she, developed I can't remember which one of the thyroidisms that are out there. And I'm almost 100% guaranteed that it was. And she's tried two or three different types, and all were hormone based. And it's kind of like, well, if you're throwing your hormones, into that, plus if you're eating Frankenfoods most of your life, like you might already be predisposed to some of that stuff too.
Sure.
Issues later on. I think we don't, look at that nearly far enough as we should.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've, kind of hit, are there any insights about kind of where your health journey has taken you, whether that's been CrossFit or, staying away from soy, even as a vegan, or, why did you get into, occupational therapy for kids even, did those align in any way? And then what's your aspirations kind of for your future, whether that's in your career, or do you want to start a business, do entrepreneurship or something like that?
Well, okay, you're going to have to rein me back in probably.
Yeah, sure.
What I say about occupational therapy, so our mom was a PT assistant, and she told me forever and ever, you should be an occupational therapist. I think that's what you would enjoy. I had a very meandering experience through college. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian or a teacher, like all my life growing up. I was interested in art. I started taking art and psychology classes. I wanted to be an art therapist, but couldn't find out enough information. I don't know that there's any programs. Maybe in the South was the problem with that.
I was going to say, no, not in Mississippi.
I was going to move to Washington, and I was like, at that age, I was like, I don't know if that's Washington, D.C. or Washington, the state. I don't even know where. So I was in my little bubble. But there's so much world out there that I had yet to experience. So, of course, I don't know what I want to do in life. And I really stumbled upon it. So our mom worked in a nursing home, and that just wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to work with kids or animals. I don't know. And so I went and observed with a pediatric OT that did some part-time work with her in the nursing home. And I mean, my little world just blossomed. It was everything I always wanted to do, but I didn't know it existed. And so just in school, we learn about kind of human development, child development, about the neurological system, anatomy, physiology, kinesiology. So, occupational therapists work in a variety of places and hospitals. I worked in an ICU my first year out of school. It was terrifying, and I didn't know if I was gonna make it in that setting, but I absolutely loved that too. But that wasn't my aspiration. I knew I wanted to work with kids always, and found a job in a pediatric outpatient clinic. I absolutely love it. And I think that just having that love of knowledge for the human body and kind of the developmental aspects of things, just how coordination and neuroanatomy and all of that kind of works together. Functional mobility was a natural, through CrossFit was, kind of a natural fit for me. It just kind of brought out my inner nerd. And I coach CrossFit classes there, and I also coach Olympic weightlifting. And I coach some mobility, kind of yoga style mobility classes there. I'm doing my 200-hour yoga teacher training. Yep. I've done some continuing education as an occupational therapist. So specifically for pediatric occupational therapy, using yoga. not just for the physical aspects of development, but for mindfulness and attention. It's kind of like you just chase those things that you love, and then somehow it all comes together. And I don't know what that's going to look like for me. I just know I love to learn, but I have to learn in a way that's motivating and interesting, and it's something I can apply, or I'm not going to learn it, but somehow I'm going to put all those things together. And I'd love to do some part-time work, maybe back in the ICU, put some, I would never have an ICU patient doing, headstands, but there's a place for yoga in the ICU. It's not just the poses, it's, meditation, mindfulness, breathing practices, and some movement. And, yoga meets you where you are. And I would like to kind of bring that into some of the less, traditional spaces, get it out of the studio, and use it with my kids that are in wheelchairs, and use it with these CrossFitters that think think they have no days off, no rest days, and teach them to be more aware of their body and their breathing. And I think there's a place for yoga in lots of different areas. So I want to find a way to put all that together as far as a business venture. I don't know what that would look like. I think those ideas will present themselves.
Yeah, yeah. When you talked about bringing, all these things, all these interests that kind of bring some of that stuff together. And I kind of find it interesting that you and I are, I think, very different in this regard. I mean, there's so many things that you and I are similar in, but but
look at you bringing all of these interests of yours together right now in your meandering path.
Right. And what I was going to say, and I totally agree with you, like somehow like these different interests and these different quirks of our personalities and our where our true passion kind of lies, they all kind of coalesce into this vision. And maybe it's not until our 30s that some of the stuff really happens, where we get really, some life experience, and then we're able to apply. I used to tell a lot of my students when I taught ICBM qualification training, I was like, you guys are in your early 20s, I'm here in my late 20s, early 30s. And to me, there's this opportunity. And I was trying to explain to them why I was, because at that point I was like, I'm going to be getting out. And I was trying to explain to them why I was getting out. And I said, there's this point in your 20s where you have all this energy, and it's just like you're at your peak. And then, but there's this experience gap that you have that probably comes over here in your 40s and your 50s. And it's you're tracking here where experience is here that's going up, and your energy levels are going down. And I was like, I feel like there's this period in here between your 30s and your 40s where it's just like you have the most energy and the most experience coalescing at the same time that you're going to have to be able to go do something. I was like, that's where I feel like I'm at. I didn't know that I would want to be a copywriter, that I'd want to just talk for a living, to do podcasts and to do other stuff and to do sales and marketing. I didn't grow up with parents that said, oh yeah, go be a salesperson. Like that did not happen. Being in the military, guess what? That didn't happen either. And I realized later on, after I kind of took a marketing personality type test that kind of said what type of marketer and salesperson would I be, that I love the conversational. I love being one-on-one with people, or even on a stage, but I love being live with people. So even though I do videos, I try to always imagine myself as if I'm giving a presentation. I imagine an audience that I'm actually giving it to. And that actually helps me do a much better video and bring a lot more liveliness to what I'm saying.
So you might not remember this, but you've been practicing this, telling stories during dad's parties with the officers at our house. He's trained you for this. So dad is a very good joke teller. He's a very good storyteller. He's a very good explainer of things and figure-outer.
And that's what makes him a great teacher. I mean, that's one of the things. I think he's, like, out of all my friends that have gone through pilot training, he's one of their favorite instructors that they had while they were there.
And absolutely. That's what I heard. I mean, from that guy I met. And I mean, he's taken a variety of experiences, and that's,
Yep.
his career now as a pilot instructor.
And he loves it.
Yeah, he could have
Absolutely loves it.
retired again,
Yeah. Yep.
and still going.
Yep. And
Well,
for me in sales and marketing, like you were saying, all that stuff meandered. Even I did political science in college. That was my thing. I love persuasive writing, which is why I like copywriting, and I didn't know that at the time, but now that's why I like when I ask you a question about, hey, what would you like to do in business? And you're like, I don't know what that looks like to me. It's just like, I know what that looks like. It could be boom, 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 like all these ideas. And this is what
yeah,
I love about doing what I'm doing. And it's why I'm here. Whether, whether a beautiful butterfly comes out of this, that these ideas and the genesis of what we do. This is why I'm here, though. I mean, I may only be able to help 10 people out of 100. I may be only able to help one person out of 100. But when it comes down to what I'm really passionate about, that's what I'm going to go do. And that's what I hope for, to be able to provide to you or to anybody else. It's like, I don't have his sales experience. I don't have his skill set, but maybe I can pair that together to be able to do. And that's what I'm trying to do with Cash Flow Better in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I think the key, you said that you don't have the experiences, like maybe you're looking at someone else or that 40-year-old self, but I think the beauty of, your individual brand or your individual, personality or whatever you're looking at is that you have only your unique experience, and you have to put those together and, learn lessons from everything you've been through, whether if it's something that works or something that doesn't work, or it's just this beautiful tapestry you put together, and you can make it work for you or work against you. And I think you're doing a beautiful job. I think we learned that from our parents as well.
Yep. Well, I'll tie a thread. I'll tie a thread through all this stuff here too. So one of the biggest things for Cash Flow Veteran that I'm really trying to do is to make sure people are getting started in business. I think entrepreneurship is one of the things that people absolutely need to be doing as we move forward into this new economy that we've already been transitioning into. Not much. I mean, COVID certainly, COVID-19 and everything else that's been going on has spotlighted the reason why people, need something. I've had many conversations with people that they had unexpected life circumstances that happen. And it's like their life, they've thought about maybe doing a business at some point in time, but it's like, if you would have just, capitalized on a little bit of that ambition at the time, you would have been vastly prepared for any life circumstance. I kind of consider like you getting started on some sort of side project is another form of life insurance. In my opinion, it's lifestyle insurance.
Oh yeah.
Getting it started in business is lifestyle insurance, to make sure that you have something that you're practicing, that you have skills that you're upgrading, over time. You're not, one of the best analogies I've had so far is like, your operating system, your computer might be, Windows 95. It might be an old school operating system, but until you actually start putting in the parts that put you where you want to go, you have to do it piece by piece as you upgrade. You're not going to be that top of the line system ready to go right away. But the earlier that you get started on it, the better off that you're going to be in the long term. And that's what I'm encouraging everybody to do. And for your personal economy, like you can't control everything that's going on around you in the world, but for what you can control in your personal economy, getting started, getting your finances right. And for me, this topic is getting your health right, just because, eating
Health
properly,
health.
health and wealth. I mean, a lot of those things actually do go hand in hand. I mean, yeah, there are, some very rich fat people that are out there, but I think the better off that you can be to learn how to control and get to know your body and control what you're putting in your body. I think those are some of those things that are small things mentally, emotionally, spiritually that you can do that get you on a path of better living, which are multiplication factors for your ability. They're the X factors of your individual lifestyle that can propel whatever business you decide to do, which is why I focus on them. What's why I focus on health, why I look at fitness, why I'm looking at this stuff, why I'm talking about it, because I think it's just as important for your business life as it is for your personal life.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you enjoy your wealth if you're not enjoying your body or your life in your body? Or, I mean, we all need longevity and wellness.
Exactly. Well, with that, I think we'll conclude. I think we've pretty much covered everything. We turned a 30-minute podcast into 45-minute one. So good job there. Not a big deal. No, it doesn't bother me at all. As long as we're providing value to any of the listeners that are out there and they get something out of it, that's all I really care about at the end of the day. So,
well, we need to talk more often.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Dad and I might be starting a podcast here soon called Speaking of the Years. And it's kind of like a boomer and millennial solve all the problems of the world.
Yeah.
So I certainly will encourage you to get on. What do you consider yourself anyway? Are you a Gen Xer?
I think I'm on the edge of the millennial, and I think I'm an exennial is the term that.
Yeah, the zennial or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's my Jackie. She was born a year before I was, and she was always like, "I'm not a millennial." She's like, maybe I'm a zennial." It's like, oh yeah, a millennial would try to put themselves in their own category. That's kind of what millennials do, right? I'm not that type of millennial. No.
That's hilarious.
Well, with that, is there any place, for anybody that would hear this message and resonate with your story? They might have a word of encouragement. They might have a question for support for themselves and in their journey. What's the best place for somebody to reach out to you to get that information?
Oh, sure. I mean, I would love for anyone to reach out with questions. I don't have a business presence at all, but I would probably use my Instagram for that. And it's Amy.Hiramsdaughter. It's AMY.HIRAMSDOTTIR. So if you're familiar with CrossFit, that's kind of a nod to CrossFit world.
Yep.
And good old Dad.
Yep. No, I got it. All right. So I'll make sure I include that in the show notes. That way people can reach out to you. So Amy, I love you. Thank you so much for coming on the Cashflow Veteran podcast. I appreciate it so much.
Love you. Thank you, bro.
All right. Well, I'm going to take care.